gonna go over how to sew a swim diaper from an absorbent brief pattern. The pattern I'm using here can be found in my shop at Little Onion and ContinencePatterns.com. But basically, a swim diaper is a snug fitting item that has minimal to no absorbency. The most important thing to keep in mind with a swim diaper is that it needs to, fit snugly against the body. And so right now we have our outer layer of PUL, which is waterproof, inner lining of athletic mesh, and then I'm using one layer of 3D bamboo zorb. And then I got my elastic and my fold over elastic for the gussets, and then my fold over elastic for the waist. The first thing we are going to do is pin the fold over elastic to the gusset. And when you're sewing fold over elastic, you want to use a 3-step zigzag stitch. All right, so we've got our 2 gussets pinned. And while we're at it, we are going to pin the absorbency to the wrong side of the lining. And of course, if you are choosing not to use absorbency, you can skip this step. So now we have our absorbency stitched down and the 2 gussets sewn. So we don't need these right now, so we're gonna set these aside because that'll be one of the last steps. Now we will pin the lining and the outer layers right side together. And we are going to be sewing with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, because that's how wide our elastic is, around the whole thing, and we'll leave one of these sections open so we can turn the whole thing. So leave it open here and then stitch around the whole outside. So we got this stitched around, and we've left this open. And I forgot to mention that we're using 1/2 inch elastic on the waistband, and so I did 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top and then 3/8 around the legs. So I've got my elastics for the legs, and I've got my elastic for the waistband. This type of elastic is great on sewn down applications because it's not going to stretch out as you sew it. I used braided elastic before on leg openings, and it stretches out. The final circumference of the leg opening is always larger than if I use knit. And so highly recommend using knit elastic for this. And so yeah, so we'll just sew this stuff down. And as you can see, my seam allowance goes right here, so I will start sewing my elastic right here so the corners will be open. All right, so we got our elastic on, and as you can see, I've kept this open. And so what I'm going to do now is just trim this. So we'll just, and trimming this, it just kind of reduces the bulk on those corners and edges when we turn the product. Now we are going to turn this right side up. And I like to pin the corners in place. So now we're going to top stitch around the whole thing. So that means when we're going over the elastic, we're going to stitch along the bottom side of the elastic and then do a narrow stitch right along the edge, about 1/4 inch. So to snap these, you can use pliers. I have a snap press. You could do sew on snaps, though. Just keep in mind that if you do decide to use sew on snaps, you're gonna need to make sure that they're sewn down very securely, so they don't fall off, because it's a lot of pressure, pulling these apart. And we can just snap these. If you wanted to make it adjustable, you could add another set of snaps to have a second row there. And now we are going to add in the gusset. So the easiest part to do the gusset is you want to find the center. So this is snapped. So I'm just going to pull this. Here's my center. And you can mark it. I'm going to mark it with a pen just slightly through the lining. And next we will take our gusset and find the center of the gusset. Okay, so I've got my gusset and I went ahead and searched the edges of these. You don't have to. The fold over elastic does have a tendency to fray a little bit, but what we're gonna do for this is we're gonna fold it in half and we're gonna find the center of the gusset. And then you can see one end of the gusset is thinner than the other. The fatter part goes on the front. So I'm just going to match this up to the center here. And when you pin it down, you want to slightly overlap it with your stitching line, your top stitching line. Because when you stitch along the gusset, you're going to stitch along your line that you did when you top stitched around. All right, and now we're done. And as you can see, I got my stitch line pretty close to the top stitching line on the front. And we got and here's what it looks like on this side. So, and I found over the years that that is the easiest way to attach gussets unless you're doing fold over elastic. Because if you try to turn and top stitch with that extra layer of the gusset and the leg opening, it can get bulky.